we have our guest today, Philip Warwick, from the chain school Embassy Summer, which offers a lot of different locations for summer programs for the children, and also has the adult school Easy English, which offers English language courses for adults.
Good evening, good afternoon, depending on which time zone you are. My name is Philip, or Phil. I work for Embassy Summer. I do a lot of teacher training. I was a CELTA trainer in the past, and of course I do lots of I think the last training I did was in Mongolia in September, trying to train up teachers so they can teach modern methods to teenagers in secondary schools. And I work in a secondary school here. I'm based in Czechia, in the second city, Brno. So I teach secondary school students here. We're going to talk about motivating the modern teenager. I'm not going to talk about internal motivation, external motivation, or intrinsic, extrinsic, or Machiavellian motivation. I'm just going to make it very informal and friendly, and suggest a few things that I do to motivate teenagers. Over the years, I've seen lots and lots of differences, some of them with me and some of them with the students. When I first started teaching, I think my first lesson was in Italy in 1988, and there was no such thing as mobile phones or smartphones. You tend to find these days that this is a little bit of a talking point when it comes to classes. No one can say that their classroom is unequipped with technology, because the students bring it in their back pockets. But it's interesting to note that actually it was only in 1992 that the first text message was sent, and it was only in 1996 that you had mobile devices that could connect to the internet. So we've seen a lot of rapid changes very quickly, and I think when you look at all the data, it seems as though technology is affecting not just teenagers, but everyone negatively in three specific ways. One way is that what used to be called our short-term memory, which is now called our working memory, things that we can recall straight away. So for example, 851710 was my best friend's telephone number, I remember from when I was a teenager. And a lot of people no longer can recall as much as they used to be able to, because everything is available at a push of a button or a swipe of a palm. So our short-term memory or working memory is getting a little bit weaker. Also, an effective filter, thinking before you act, that's been eroded with technology. So whereas before we would perhaps look at something we wanted to buy and then save up over several months, we're in a sort of meet her on a Monday, get married on a Wednesday type of lifestyle. So we don't really think as much as we used to before acting. And finally, because we've got all this help with technology, we actually don't use as many synapses, and there's not as much sort of going on with our brains as there used to be. But it's not all bad news, because one of the things that really encourages people to improve their working memory, to have a more effective filter, and to use more of their brain, is actually being able to communicate in a second language and do some code switching. So I think our jobs are pretty much safe and secure, you'll be pleased to know, because we are going to have a situation where maybe we're not teaching students so that they can understand English, because there are apps that will automatically translate everything, but we're teaching students in order to improve or a bit of brain training. So I think we're going to be around for some time. Now, one of the things I would say with technology, different people have different approaches to it. A lot of my colleagues use AI to help create lesson plans. I tend to be a little bit wary, a little bit of AI, because I think I don't want to become too reliant on it. I want to understand everything and how it works before I really embrace it. And I'm not ready to embrace AI quite yet. It's a little bit about age, I suppose. I mean, when I was a kid, I had an older brother, and so obviously the clothes I got were sometimes my brother's cast-me-offs or hand-me-downs. These days with technology, technology tends to go up. So when you finish with your phone, you might give it to your grandmother or something. Again, attitudes to teachers have changed since I've been teaching. We no longer have perhaps the plinth that we used to have in terms of accepted by parents and the parents who support us. And of course, there's a huge difference with the students that we teach. I mean, there's an old adage that we have 21st century students taught by 20th century teachers using 19th century methods in 18th century buildings. And most of our students are sort of digital residents. They exist online. They sign into YouTube. They leave a digital footprint. So they're used to working in this way. I find though that I'll go back to a chap who's died a few years ago now, but I think you all know him, Steve Jobs, and he was very much interested in supplying technology to the education section. This is a quote that I think is quite relevant even today. He said, "I used to think that technology could help education. I've probably spearheaded giving away more computer equipment to schools than anyone else on the planet. But I've had to come to the inevitable conclusion that the problem is not one that technology can hope to solve. What's wrong with education cannot be fixed with technology. No amount of technology will make a dent." That's not to say that technology can't enhance learning, but I do a lot of teacher observations and I watch a lot of classes, teenage learners studying English. And sometimes I think I see lessons where technology is used just because it's there. Kahoot, of course, we all know, but how much of a Kahoot lesson where everything is on the speed of pressing the button and looking at the screen, how much of that is actual real communication, conversation, building confidence? Maybe not so much. And of course, we know that English is a world language. It's always changing. There's lots of things going on. So at the moment, if you were in England, you wouldn't be in January, you'd be in Veganuary, because a lot of British people, after overconsumption over Christmas, decide to perhaps go on a diet and become a vegan for January. Again, another month that we have in aid of charity and prostate cancer is Movember, where men grow beards and moustaches for charity. Again, Stoptober, if you're addicted to cigarettes or any other addiction. October is no longer known as Stoptober. October is known as Stoptober. It's designed to help support you stop any addictions. And over the last couple of years, we don't have September, we have Scroll-Free September, where we encourage people to have a little bit of a digital detox. And a lot of research says that everyone from the ages of 11 up all the way through to the silver surfers of my age think they use technology a little too much. So what I'm going to look at is not how we can embed technology, because I'm sure we use it anyhow, as I'm using it at the moment with this presentation. But we're going to look at going old school, the sort of chalk and talk, if you like. You might recognize that caricature as Charles Darwin. And one of my favorite quotes is this: in times of massive upheaval, and I think we are going through a fourth industrial revolution, the revolution of things, where things communicate with other things, and humanity is left on the side a little bit. It says it's not the strongest or most intelligent that survive, it's those that are most adaptable to change that continue to thrive. And I think, as a background to what I want to do in this session, which is show you some activities I use with my teenage students, you need to have a holistic viewpoint of what's expected at different stages of the lifelong learning environment. And for me, I firmly feel that a preschool teacher or a kindergarten teacher, a successful one, basically just make sure that the students leave with a smile on their face. The students play, they have fun, they're enjoying English. And again, in terms of motivation, if you've had fun in one lesson, one subject, when you move to a different school, you're looking forward to that subject. So the students are motivated to continue. Again, in primary school, very much I feel that we need to start creating an English-only environment, because the function of a language is to communicate. They can study morphology and translation at university. I think they need to be able to begin to feel comfortable. So I've taught a few primary school classes in my varied career, and I always think that sometimes success is just getting the students to survive 30 minutes without panicking that's only in English. But then in secondary school, I really believe that we need to have an operational level of English. So in the secondary school I work here in Brno, I teach some exam seminars. At the moment, I'm preparing students for C2, what used to be the Cambridge Proficiency, but I also teach a lot of conversational classes. And I really feel that a good teacher does a lot of the work outside of the class, and in the classroom, it's the students who are doing all the work. So they're not just passively listening to the teacher. The teacher, as the saying goes, is no longer the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side. And of course, once they have an operational level of English, then that really helps when it comes down to tertiary learning and lifelong learning. Even if they decide to go to tertiary education in their own countries, a lot of universities get a lot of revenue from foreign students, so a lot of the courses are actually delivered in multiple languages. A few years ago now, I did some work in one of the universities in Warsaw in their English department, and they had 150 Chinese students and about 80 Arab students and 2 Polish students as their student base for the English department. So, and that was Poland. So what we're going to look at today is basically a toolkit, if you like, of things to throw in for 5 or 10 minutes into a class to get the students engaged, interested, refocused. So some simple creative classes activities to use in class. One of the things that I would say is quite useful to do, one of the classroom strategies, you don't want the students to be passive, sitting down on a chair, not moving too much, especially when a school day might be as long as 6, or even with extracurricular 8 hours a day. There's got to be some sort of movement. And of course, if English is used as communication, then I think we should all use mix and mingle activities when the students get up and move around and ask each other questions. And a lot of those mix and mingle activities are information gap activities. So you ask someone for some information because they know it and you don't. A lot of the information you ask is maybe about their opinions, or if they have a sheet of information about Mr. Smith and what time he got up, you'd ask those questions so they can answer them. And so a standard activity that I think we all do is find someone who. I tend to combine my find someone who with another game, bingo. So what I do is I get the students to have a bingo card. And of course, if you know bingo, the idea is to get a line either horizontally or vertically, and then you shout bingo and you've got it. Normally, a bingo card would have numbers on, but obviously we don't want to teach maths, we want to teach English. So I will get the students to create some categories, or I will provide some categories. These categories are for teachers. So you'll find things like who has been teaching for less than 8 years, or who has taught some very young learners last year. So they will choose where they will put these in the boxes, and they'll write some prompts so they'll know basically which box. So the top right hand corner might have likes Japanese food, etc., etc. And then they'll go around. I'll give them a time limit, and they'll go around and they'll ask and answer questions with their classmates. And if they find someone who can say hello in 4 languages and they've written it down, they'll write that person's name in the box. And if they've got 5 or 4, however big you want to make the bingo box, they shout out bingo, the activity stops, they go back, and then they share with the partner they're sitting next to all the information that they managed to get. And that works for people who, again, you monitor. You notice here I've got a few perfect sentences. Has been swimming in the sea this year, or probably not in Moscow because it's been too cold, but you know what I mean. You change the items to reflect the level of the students. For students who are lower level, I tend to use an activity called word clouds. So I'll have, here we've got 9 answers, and the answers are answers to questions about me. So I'll give the students some prompts. So if you look at number 1, the answer is no, I didn't. And above that, there are some letters in red. Now, we're going to do this activity with the chat. So let's see who's fastest. There's a question. I'm answering the question. See if you can work out what the question is and write it into the chat box. No, I didn't. She's very old, actually. She's in her early 80s, and I try to talk to her every week, but I didn't speak to her yesterday. No, I spoke to her at the weekend, but not yesterday. Yesterday was Monday, and I'd spoken to her then. She doesn't look like me. She looks like my youngest daughter, though, but I didn't speak to her yesterday. And again, Vera, remember those red letters, because of course, when you say number 2, have you got any brothers and sisters? That's correct. But has anyone got number 1? She's very old. She's still alive. She lives in Wales. I tend to speak to her multiple times a week, but I didn't speak to her yesterday. And again, that would be, did you speak to your And of course, I am 56 years old, so unfortunately my granny is long dead. But yes, did you speak to your mother yesterday? And again, you give them prompts, you give them, and I like this because it's an extended speaking activity. So you make it easier as you go along. For example, number 7, if you look at number 7, yes, I am. I was born in Brighton, which is in the southeast. So I have a British passport. I'm not Scottish, I'm not Welsh. And again, you can work out that that's, are you English? So you can adapt the things. And of course, by giving them prompts, I get them to create their own questions and their own word clouds as well. And they can sort of work through that. So that's word clouds. I also, because I said I don't really use technology, but I do sometimes do some races. Could be word races, and I do sometimes do a phone swap. So I'll get the students to. Sometimes what I'll do at the start of a lesson, I'll say, right, okay, so let's see how creative you are. I want you to have a look around the classroom. I want you to get your camera on, and in about 60 seconds, I will give you 60 seconds to get up and take a picture that displays how creative you are. And then they take a picture with their phone, and then they exchange pictures with their phone, and I'll give them some additional questions. So they'll ask their partner how long they've had the phone. Again, they've just taken a picture. So what was the last picture? What is the most used app? Or I'll give them a phone race. I'll get them to use an English search engine, and I'll say, right, find something to eat, find something dangerous, somewhere to go on holiday, etc., etc. If internet connections are a problem, I won't do a phone race. I'll do a course book race. I find that course books are a good source of visual images. So you're going to find something to eat in a unit on food, or you're going to find something to wear in a unit on fashion. I like my students to use the course books in a non-linear way, which means they go backwards and forwards and they use it as a resource. So if you don't have an internet connection, you can use you can have a course book race instead. Let's go on to the next one. Personality quizzes. So one of the things I do is with warmers, you want to warm them up. Sometimes you need coolers to cool them down, depending on how the energy levels are in the class. I'll put on the board some suffixes, and then I'll put a letter on the board, and the students will have 30 seconds to try and think of some adjectives, or, well, these are all adjectival suffixes, but if you use different suffixes, you can create different words. But I'm looking for adjectives, so they might, can anyone come up with any adjectives using those suffixes beginning with A? Yeah, active would be a good one. Or adventurous or adaptable. There you go. So you get the students to work in pairs or small groups, and they come up with some adjectives. And then you give them a variety of different letters. You wouldn't give them too long. You want them to focus on some vocabulary. You might get them to write the vocabulary down. So they have lots of adjectives on a piece of paper. And then I say to them, right, okay, so just relax. Yeah, don't worry about those words you've written down. Just relax. Empty your mind. And again, I'm going to ask you to do this. So I want you to relax. I want you to empty your mind. I want you to have something to write. You can write in the chat box, or you can hold a pen and a piece of paper. And now I want you to trust me a little bit. I want you to get comfortable, and I'd like you to close your eyes. So if you close your eyes, as I am doing now, I'd like you to think really hard, so your mind is focusing on one color, just one color. And as soon as your mind is full of that one color, I'd like you to write that color down. Now, it could be something like red or blue or green. I'd like you to write down 3 adjectives, how you felt when you were thinking of this color. Maybe it would be some negative adjectives, or maybe some neutral adjectives. So here are 3 or so. So the students would write down 3 or 4 adjectives, hence the previous activity where you've elicited lots of adjectives so they can think of it. Then they close their eyes again. And this time I say, right, okay, you're outside. You're not in Russia. You're somewhere else, somewhere a little bit exotic. It's not winter. You can feel the ground beneath your feet. And coming towards you, you can see an animal. And it's getting closer and closer. And it might be in the sky, it might be in the ground, it might be going slowly, it might be going quickly. What's the animal? And again, they do the same thing for the animal, and they'd write down the adjectives. And then the final one, I say, right, close your eyes. I'm going to say one word. I'm going to say it 3 times, and I'd like you to visualize a picture. And again, they close their eyes, and I say water. And I repeat it, water, water, water. And then I get them to write down what they saw. And again, they'd write down a couple of adjectives. So they've got a color and some adjectives, they've got an animal and some adjectives, and they've got something with water. And then I say, right, you've just done a psychological test, a personality quiz. What have you done? And they say, oh, I don't know. And I said, well, the color, or more importantly, the adjectives, this is how other people see you. And throughout life, you know, if you look for a partner to complete you, you should look for the adjectives that describe the animal. And here I've got hairy, big, dangerous. Normally they come up with some funny things, and they get them laughing a little bit. And then I say, right, okay, the water, this is how you find relationships in general, not just romantic relationships, but relationships with other people. And then they discuss whether it's true or whether it's false. So it's a nice little activity to combine the adjectives with, you know, a basic personality quiz. So I'll do that as something different, just to get them speaking. A quick game I'll do is the CNS game. Now, this is a spoken game, so it's a word association game. So if I was to say something like boy, I will put the students into small groups, 3, 4, or 5, and I get each group to take turns saying a word connected to the word I say. So boy, most people are going to say girl, or they could say something like, I suppose, naughty boy, but it has to be some way connected to the word. So it also is very important that the words don't start with C or S. They can start with any other letter, but not the letters C or S. Hence the name of the game, the CNS game. So you can't say cowboy, you can't say child, you can't say son, and you have to be in some way related. So boy, fridge, we don't keep boys in fridges, so of course not. So just to give you an idea, it's a 5-second game. I explain it's an English game, so they don't win anything, they only lose. And I give them pieces of paper, each team. And every time they make a mistake or they don't give me a word, they lose a piece of paper. And then I'll think of words that will prompt a word beginning with C or S. So for example, you don't need to write, but I want you to think and react. Say a word related to my word. It doesn't matter if no one else can hear you. So if I said the word teacher, think of what word would come to mind. School, student, that sort of thing. Table, chair, beach, well, sun, sea, sand. So I give them words that normally respond to a word beginning with C or S. And they normally find it a bit of fun. And if they're working in groups, someone will make a mistake, they'll lose a life, we'll start again, and then they'll get into the flow of it. And it's a way of just creating some energy. If you've had a cool down activity like a reading and you just want to get them active again, you can do this activity and it doesn't take very long at all. Again, something I'll do just to get them moving around. I'll only allow them to speak in English, depending on the number of students I have in class. Now, generally, I'm quite lucky with the English classes here because language classes are split into two. So I have class A and class B, and I wouldn't have more than 20 students. And if I've got a large classroom, I'll divide them into 2 or 3 teams. 20, I would say 3, and you've got about 6 or 7 in each team. And I'll say, right, one person is the leader, and they're going to organize you in a line based on something, and they're going to ask you questions in English and you're going to respond. So I might get them to put themselves in alphabetical order with names if they don't know each other. It's the first day of the semester. Or, you know, if they're teachers, in order of teaching experience, or in order of shoe size, in birthday order, what time they got up today, and again, order of how long it took you to get there. And then I question the students who are in the line to make sure it's all in the right category. And it just creates a little bit of movement and energy and gets the students to work in teams. And then we reflect on how they worked as a group. So that can work quite well. I'll also get them to create pictures a little bit. So I'll take a piece of paper and I'll get them to draw what they did in their last holidays, you know, over the Christmas period in this case, or it could be the last weekend if you think the students have done something, if it's been a sort of New Year's celebration or Easter or any of these cultural events. They then give the pictures to me, so it's fast drawing, so they have to draw quite quickly. It doesn't have to be amazing, you know, it can be stick figures if you like. And then I ask them to mix and mingle, and they discuss. They don't see the pictures, but they discuss what they drew, and they discuss why they drew it. So all the students go around talking about what they drew, why they drew it. And then in the meantime, I've put all the pictures onto some desks, like a gallery, and I get them to walk around the desks in a circle, looking at the pictures, and then I get them to take turns picking a picture and saying, not their picture, but someone else's. Who's this? What did they draw? Why? And again, they explain why they took that picture, and they can do it in smaller groups if you've got large group sizes. But it's just, I find sometimes one of the things that I like doing when I have a lot of differences in level is I like giving tasks that don't differentiate in terms of ability. So when you're drawing something, okay, it'll differentiate in terms of artistic ability, but not English. So everyone feels they can do it. So I don't automatically give tasks that are just language based, just so I can be as inclusive as possible. I'll do alphabet races. I'll get the students to write an alphabet on a piece of paper with enough space to be able to write a word next to that. I might not get them to write the whole alphabet. As you can see here, we're missing a few letters that are a little difficult. And then I'll say to them, you're not going to like this activity because I'm going to go too quickly and you're not going to have enough time to think. I said there's a strategy for this. If you've got the full English alphabet, you'll have 26 letters. And I might ask you to write down a sport. Now, obviously, you could choose the letter B, and you could write baseball or basketball, but you'd be a little stupid if you did that, because B is a high-frequency letter. Far better to choose a letter like V and write down volleyball, because that's harder to use. Because once you've used the word, the letter, let's say B, and I'm talking about job, and you have bus driver, B is gone. You can't use B again. And the task is to get one word for every letter of the alphabet or the letters you've decided to display. Again, I get them in groups. I say one person can write, the others can help. When I say the magic word, change, you have to give the pen or pencil to someone else in your team and they'll continue. And what I do is I give them too many categories, so they have to process it. So I'll say, write down a country, write down a currency, write down a piece of furniture, write down a building in your hometown, write down a color, write down a number. So I give them lots and lots and lots of input, too much input. And the person who's writing is writing one word. The other students are thinking of the other things so they can write when we change. And it doesn't take too long, maybe about 7 or 8 minutes, by giving them lots of categories. Write down a family member, write down a fruit, write down a vegetable, where they've got one word for everything. So that's stage 1. Stage 2 is to get 2 groups together, and then they swap pieces of paper. They make sure they can read all the words, because sometimes the handwriting isn't great. And then they test their team on how many words you can remember. And of course, they'll give clues. So if P was used for fruit, pineapple, they'll say, this is a fruit. You know, it's a big fruit. It's yellow. Pineapple. So they'll test each other twice. And I find it works quite well. Again, as long as, and it doesn't matter if they've all got 26. Generally, by the time you've finished, most people have got at least a few words they can deal with. Something else I do, if I want to prepare students for exams, which I do, one of the hardest bits is the sentence transformations. So I'll say, right, we're going to do a bit of Venusian translation. So Venusian is just like English in terms of the grammar. The grammar is exactly the same. In fact, if we look at words in a language, you have grammar words and you have content words, or structure words and lexical words. So if I say the coffee is on the table, coffee and table would be content or lexical words. That is on grammar or structural words. So again, I don't know why it's not quite in the right place. Sorry for that, but I'll give the student. I'll explain to the students, and then I'll give them a sentence. So Spiebel is spinter than any other splurge in her flumble. Can you keep the order of the words? But can anyone write a sentence where they would translate that into English? Now, there's an almost infinite amount of ways you can translate, but can someone write a sentence? Look at the clues. Obviously, you've got than. That sort of indicates comparative forms. Her, that would sort of indicate a female pronoun, which might help you with the first word. Could anyone write a sentence where you get the nonsense words and you replace them with English words? Let's see who's going to be fast at doing this while I take a sip of coffee. So if you look at it, Spiebel, this is probably a proper noun, is spinter, this is a comparative adjective. Then, yeah, so Rose is smarter than any other student in her class. Yeah, perfect. And again, we've got similar sentences. As I said, there's any number of sentences you can come up with, as long as they follow that grammar that you've sort of created. And then I said, that's great. You've got a sentence. Now here's another sentence. And let's say you had the first one, or let's do Rose is smarter than any other student in her class. Can you write the sentence so it means the same? Well, Rose is the smartest student in her class. So they can see pretty much comparatives and superlatives are reciprocal pairs. And then you'll give them two sentences and you say, these mean the same. Yeah, don't worry about the content words. What's being tested here? And again, if you look at it, Bimble nixed if Doofy could yump him her toogle for a few minutes. Well, you see, if, you might think conditionals. But if you look at the second sentence, Bimble nixed to rimple Doofy's toogle for a few minutes. It's not conditionals. And they say, maybe it's reported speech. So you're getting them to look at the reciprocal pairs, sentences that say the same things in different ways using different structures without giving them a context. So they look at the grammar. And this really helps with students who are preparing for sentence transformations. Again, I'll put the students in small groups and I'll say, right, okay, here's a prompt board. I want you to create something that none of you can do, none of you like, none of you have, none of you use, some of you, all of you. And then the students will say a sentence like a cat. We have a cat. And the other students or the other group, if I get them to work in two groups opposite themselves, they say, we think none of you have cats. Ah, yes, you're right, because they have 4 sentences, yeah, that are true for the group. Moving on, a speaking race. I'll give students a piece of paper like this, and you'll notice that we have purple, peanuts, seat, welcome, hand, gorilla, ice, and winning. Obviously, the words will depend on the level of the students. And then I'll say, right, okay, so what I want you to do is you'll both have, I normally do it as a pair work activity, or I might do it as an activity of 3. You'll both have stopwatches on. Student A will look at all the words purple, peanuts, seat, welcome, hand, gorilla, ice, winner, and we'll think of a sentence using as many of those words as they can and again, sometimes I give them 15 seconds. So the gorilla welcomed me and handed me an ice cream with some peanuts. The ice cream was purple, and then the other person will cross off the words they've used in those 15 seconds. And then the second student will do the second row, and then back to student A, or if you've got 3 students, we'll do the third row, and you'll see which student managed to use most of the words in their 15 or 20 seconds, just speaking. So it's a speaking race. Again, sometimes in a speaking exam, students will have to describe pictures. So I say, right, before you can compare pictures, you have to know about how to talk about nothing. So I say, here's a picture, describe it. And they'll say, well, in the top right-hand corner, we can see nothing. Just below this nothing, there's a little bit more nothing, which is a little different from the nothing in the center. So I'll give them all the prompts, and they feel confident about talking about nothing for a minute. And that makes it easier when they actually have a picture to talk about. But they've got the structure and the scaffolding there. Picture compare, again, I'll give them prompt sheets, and so I'll say, here you've got 2 pictures, compare them. Your partner's going to listen, and every time you use one of the words or phrases in the box, they're going to tick them off. How many can you use in a minute? If I'm dealing with grammar, something that I find quite challenging, I'll often take it from a course book. I'll take a sentence like this, and I'll put each word on a separate piece of paper. I'll get the students to write the words. On the other side is blank, and I'll say, right, working in groups, what I want you to do is I want you to turn over one of these pieces of paper, and I want you to replace the one word with two. So for example, you could turn over he and you could write my sister. You don't have to, you can change the meaning of the sentence, but it's got to always remain grammatically correct. So again, the process starts quite easily, but it gets quite difficult quite quickly. And it really focuses on structure and grammar and extended noun phrases. If you want to make it easier, you can do take two and replace it with one. Going the other way is a little bit harder. Fast writing. So if I've got 5 or 10 minutes at the end of a lesson, what I'll tend to do is I'll write some words on the board, and I'll say, right, okay, let's say we've talked about travel in today's lesson. You're going to do a little bit of writing on travel. I want you to focus on these words on the board. Every time you use one of these words correctly, you will score 1 point. Every time you use one of these words incorrectly, you'll lose a point. I want you to think about how you can use these words in a bit of writing about travel. I'm not too interested in the content as long as it is about travel. I'm more interested in how you use these words. And of course, if you look at the words I've chosen, they're words that students avoid using, like pronouns and prepositions and so on. So I give them, depending on the level, it could be as short as 3 minutes, and they're furiously writing because they've had time to think, and then they swap pieces of paper and they count out how many points their partner scored. And of course, they have to check that they're right. So it gives us a lot of peer correction to deal with in a short space of time. Again, one of the things I'll do to create longer utterances, I'll put either the students will work with pieces of paper, or if there's enough for them to all come to the front with a board, I'll divide the board into sections, or I'll give each group a piece of paper, and in the middle of the piece of paper I'll write a word. Wait. And then I'll either say before or afterwards, and they have to add a clause so it makes grammatical sense. So I might say afterwards, wait for an answer. And then I'll say before, you must wait for an answer. And then I'll keep on going after, before, after, and gradually their utterances get longer and longer and longer. And of course, this really helps. There's a little bit of fun. So it's something that you allow students time to think about, and they work in groups and they write the sentences. But at the end of the activity, they've got quite a long utterance, and they're quite surprised with themselves that this is one long utterance. And this is, of course, what we want to encourage them when we get them to write. Again, if they're lower levels, I might just get them to create a nice sort of word diagram connected to the words that we've done. So it's still challenging, but it's revision, and it's if they've got a list of words, it's just taking the words from the book and trying to create a word diagram. Again, with speaking, I might put suffixes on there, and I might say, right, okay, let's talk about education. Listen to your partner. Every time he uses a word with one of these suffixes, give him a point. So the teachers are capable of teaching helpful students, and every time they hear it, they tick a suffix. Again, superlative races. I'll have some words. Here we've got words that are connected to, I suppose, transport. And I'll say, right, can you give me some sentences connecting. So a rocket is far more expensive than inline skates. A bicycle is much slower than a car. Yeah, so they'll think of, and you can have random, they don't have to be connected to the same topic. You make it more challenging by having random groups of nouns, if you like. For lower levels, I sometimes do strawberry banana. It doesn't have to be strawberry banana. I explain that we're going to count to 20 and we go round 1, 2, 3. Each student says a different number. Then I explain that all of the numbers divisible by 3 are bananas. So they can't say 3, 6, 9. They have to say banana. 1, 2, banana. 4, 5, banana, etc., etc. Then I say everything divisible by 5 is a strawberry. So 1, 2, banana, 4, strawberry, banana. And of course, they go around. Every time they make a mistake, we start again. You can replace strawberry or banana with other words, depending on what you're doing. And it's just a quick way of getting a little bit of noise in the classroom and, of course, getting them to focus on orders. Yeah, and it works quite well. I'll do word auctions. So, for example, I'll say, right, we're going to have an auction. I'll give you a category. You're in teams. How many sports can you name in 30 seconds? And the students will bid. I can name 10. I can name 15. I can name 20. And the team that bids the most gets the chance to answer. So it's 30 seconds. If they said they could name 30 or 20 sports, the other groups count as they speak. I time. If they couldn't give 20 and they could only give 19 sports, all the other teams get 19 points and the bidders get 0. And generally this works quite well. When you say the first team to get more than 50 points wins. And it's a little bit of energy, a little bit of revision. It works quite well. Again, something I do to get a little bit of movement is I'll do a body drill. So I teach high-level students, but I've got some collocations here with some intensifiers. So what I'll do is I'll say, do what I do and say what I say. So, bitterly disappointing. Every time I do this, I want you to say bitterly disappointing. Fully occupied. Painfully obvious. So you go through these kinesthetic sort of completely confused, yeah? And then you get the students to see how many they can remember. And of course, every time you do this during the lesson, they're supposed to respond with the collocations. And it's a bit of fun. And of course, it's a way of helping to review and remember vocabulary. Prediction exercises. Again, this is from a course book, and I'll get the students to predict. So it's a Korean school. What are the missing words? And they'll talk together, and then they'll open their books and have a look. And I tend to do a little bit of this because maybe the weaker students can't do all the reading, or I want to give some of the reading for homework, so I'll just be able to take a little bit of it and do more with a little bit. I might do things like a dictation activity. So again, I'll say the only thing I want you to write down is the thing that you can't write down. And the students say, that sounds strange. What do you mean? And I say, well, basically, if I say my name is blah, 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 that last word is a little difficult to say. Blah, blah. So I don't want you to write down my name is. I want you to just write down the last word so that it makes the sentence true for you, if you like. And so again, let's do you can do lots of different dictation activities. A dictation machine is where you will say the words. Shouting dictation is where you have space because teenagers are a little bit self-conscious. So I have some students at one end of the class and they're dictating to students at the other end, so they have to shout. Running dictation is where you have texts around the classrooms and they run up and they talk, they read and then they come back and they dictate to their partner. but we're going to do a personal dictation. So I say it's a number dictation. Listen, and I'd like you to try and think of a word. I would never pay more than blah, 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 blah rubles for a haircut. I'd never pay more than blah, 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 blah rubles for a haircut. Students would write down a number. If you came home with me, you'd find I have approximately blah, 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 blah pairs of shoes. And they'd write down another number. And you give them sentences like this. You'd repeat them a couple of times. The most lessons I have taught in a week is around blah, 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 blah. At the end, they'd have some numbers. They'd look at the numbers they have, they compare it with their partners, and then they'd see if they can remember the sentences they heard. And of course, they can remember because they got a personalized answer. Now, the last activity we'll do is transference. So one of the things that you'll find with course books is they're all linked to normally units. So we have, again, some vocabulary for personal qualities. Let's just take one. Can anyone have a look at this and tell me what's the person's job? Winning is the most important thing for me. I've always been competitive, so I love my job. I think I'm a good leader. It's important that all the players know what they're doing, and it's my job to tell them the decisions I make. It's a coach, yeah. So we work out, we're doing something on coaches, and then I say, right, if this person was a teacher, what words would you change? Well, obviously you change winning, and you change competitive. Obviously you wouldn't use players, you'd use students. So they'd have to reformulate the text so it makes sense for a teacher, or for a president, or for a doctor, or for a general. And so you've got them trying to think critically, look at reading the text, the short text more extensively, and trying to make the differences so that they can tell whether they're writing for a doctor or a general or a teacher. And so in the meantime, I'll just say, well, enjoy your teaching. I always do. And if you decide to come on one of the summer courses that we have, I'll see you around. We tend to organize weekly workshops in our summer schools for our teachers, but we also allow anyone who's a teacher who comes over as a group leader to attend as well. Feel free to join if you do send some students over.